Good day everyone, and welcome to our presentation entitled Assumptions in Research. This topic plays a crucial role in the research process, particularly when we reach the methodology section of a paper. We may not always notice them, but assumptions influence how we interpret our data, design our instruments, and even how we defend our findings. So today, we will unpack what assumptions are, why they matter, the different types, and how we applied them in our actual research. What are assumptions in research? Assumptions are conditions that are accepted as true, even if they aren't tested directly in the study. They are things we believe or trust to be in place so that our research can proceed smoothly and logically. For example, we might assume that participants will answer a questionnaire truthfully. We won't test whether they lied, but we move forward with that belief. These assumptions are not careless guesses. They are grounded in logic, common sense, prior studies, or even ethical expectations. Without these assumptions, we'd be stuck trying to prove everything. We'd waste time testing things that are already widely accepted or realistically assumed. So instead, we declare them clearly to keep the research process focused. Now, not all assumptions are the same. We categorize them into three major types: theoretical assumptions. These relate to the ideas or theories that guide our research. Methodological assumptions. These deal with the tools, instruments, or design we use to collect data. Practical assumptions. These are about the actual conditions during data gathering, like how participants behave or whether the environment is stable. Let's begin with theoretical assumptions. These are the assumptions we make about the concepts or frameworks we are using to guide our research. We don't test these theories in our study. We simply trust that they are valid and appropriate for our context. For example, we assume that the concepts of intrinsic and extrinsic motivation defined in self-determination theory are applicable to our student respondents. In this case, the researcher is working under the belief that SDT accurately describes how students are motivated, and that this theory fits the profile of the target population. Next, we have methodological assumptions. These refer to the instruments or techniques we use to collect data. We assume that our tools are working properly and capturing what they're meant to capture. Example, we assume that the questionnaire reliably captures the attitudes of students toward online learning. In other words, we are assuming the tool is valid and reliable, meaning, it gives consistent results and measures exactly what we want to know. We don't revalidate the instrument inside the study, but we move forward assuming its effectiveness based on prior use or development. Lastly, we have practical assumptions. These are the assumptions we make about real-world behavior during the research, things we can't fully control, but we believe are happening as expected. Example, we assume that all students followed instructions and responded truthfully without external influence. This kind of assumption is very common, especially in survey-based or classroom-based studies. We don't know for sure what students were thinking while answering, or whether they were distracted, but we assume honesty and compliance for the data to be considered valid.
Here is the sample study entitled Math Performance in Multigrade Classrooms. Let's say we conducted research in a mixed-grade setting. We made several practical and methodological assumptions to guide our data interpretation. We assumed that students received instruction appropriate to their grade levels. This matters because if they didn't, we couldn't fairly assess their math performance. We assumed that the learning environment in the multigrade classroom was conducive to focused academic work. Without this, external chaos could explain poor performance, not the instructional method. We assumed that the tools we used to assess math performance were tailored to the students' respective grade levels. A test that's too easy or too difficult would skew the results. We assumed that the teachers provided consistent instruction across the different grade levels, so that any variation in performance is due to ability, not unequal teaching. We assumed that students gave genuine effort during assessments, not rushing through or guessing randomly. Lastly, we assumed that outside distractions like noise or peer influence had minimal impact on the results. All these assumptions allow us to isolate and evaluate the main variable we're interested in: math. These assumptions are not just side comments, they're foundations. They justify why we selected certain tools, help us interpret our results more accurately, and allow us to draw conclusions that are based on structured, not random, reasoning. Without these assumptions, our study would be unstable, like a house built on sand. Let's clear up 3 concepts that often get confused. Assumptions are things we accept as true, like expecting honest answers. Limitations are things we cannot control, like a small sample size or limited access to participants. Delimitations are boundaries we set on purpose, like choosing only one school or one subject. Being able to distinguish these 3 shows that we're critically aware of our research's strengths and boundaries. I hope this presentation gave you a clear understanding of what research assumptions are, how they function, and how they were applied in our study. These assumptions help researchers focus their energy on interpreting data instead of trying to control every single variable. Thank you for listening.